Okay, it's a small group, but I do need you to count off before we start. So go ahead, just 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3,
4,
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and
10,
11,
12,
12, 13.
13. Okay, remember your number. All right. Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to be speaking with one voice. Okay, as many of you have probably experienced, leagues are going through some leadership challenges as to maybe we're looking at different models of leadership. Maybe there's struggles with finding leaders for our league for different tasks. And we have some amazing speakers who are going to talk about their models in their league. And because the league is pretty strict about speaking with one voice, and typically when you have a president and a board and officers, it's the president who speaks for the league. But what do you do when you have shared leadership? How do you determine who's going to speak for the league? How do you determine what might go before a leadership team or before a board? And whenever you have changes and new systems or a new model, there could be some conflict. So we're going to talk about all of that. And we're going to start with Bonnie Bless-Boenish, who is from the Clallam League, and she's going to talk about their particular model and how they came to it.
Okay, hello, everybody. We, like many of you, our nominating committee couldn't find president, vice president, those traditional roles. Luckily, in our bylaws had some language about that, and it said that we could have a shared leadership, which is called a council of directors. We're into our 3rd year of using that, and we are each elected for a 1-year term. So the main thing is that our leadership council includes the chair of all committees. So in the past, we didn't always have the chairs of committees as part of that board or leadership team. And what we found happening was that we weren't getting that good communication between what was happening in those committees. And sometimes we would hear about it and it was, oh my gosh, we didn't know that was happening. And it looks like maybe people are drifting. And so now that's a requirement. So we ask that each chair of a committee be part of our team, and we meet monthly. We try to have our meetings in person and they last an hour and a half, and we're really pretty good about keeping to that hour and a half time limit. We ask the chairs of all those committees to submit a monthly report a week ahead of time. So everybody that's part of that leadership council can look that over. We don't take a whole lot of our meeting time to discuss it unless there's a question or some new updates that they give us. And that way we all know what's happening. We also, the other thing that we've gone to, we have a monthly calendar outline. It's now 3 pages, and that is looking at what's happening usually in our either at the state level or locally, and then we back up a month or 2 with planning. So we know, okay, if this is coming up, we need to make sure that we are planning, getting that all squared away. We rotate the facilitation of the meetings. So it's on a volunteer basis. So somebody will say, I'll facilitate the next meeting and I'll draft the agenda. And that planning calendar has really helped us do that. The other thing that we have found works really good for the communication piece is one of our people decided they would take care of all the secretarial duties. One person said, I will do all the treasurer duties. And then all the rest of the duties are shared amongst us. Somebody attends the president's meeting. Somebody else attends the MELD meetings. We have a lot of people that we encourage to be part of affinity groups, so that they're got people who are hearing things directly from the state level and from other leagues. We feel like we have been successful because of that detailed calendar. And we also, when it comes to speaking for the league, we decide who that person should be based on their expertise, and whatever they would say has to go through the council ahead of time. And we all realize that we have different strengths and areas of interest, and we have decided that we will go with where the strengths and the interests of the people are. if somebody's gonna be gone, somebody else picks up the slack for it. And I would just say that, I think our initial commitment to each other was that we didn't want our league to fold because we didn't have those leadership positions. And so the group that has stepped forward really feels like that's a really important thing, is to keep our league going. And we've been very lucky because we all, for the most part, really get along, and if we have something to discuss, we bring it up and then discuss it in a real civil manner.
I have a question about just the real basics of secretarial and treasurer.
Mhm.
Are those also shared, or does one person take care of
Just
it?
one person.
Okay,
And I know other leagues might do it different, but we have a dedicated person for each one of those roles.
all right. And Barb?
I'm with the Seattle King County League, and this year has been a huge transition year for Seattle King County. We have always operated with a very traditional model as well: president first, second vice president. We had two organizations. We have two organizations, C4, C3, so we required two different treasurers, we required two boards, we had two board meetings every month. So it was quite involved. And it operated that way for many, many years. And there really isn't any one reason. It's really a confluence of reasons that has caused that model to suffer, not just this past year, but several years coming. Some of it is an aging membership, frankly speaking, and the people are changing the ways in which they are engaging with the league. Some of it has to do with the pandemic. Some of it has to do with people starting to feel very strongly about things happening and are saying the league isn't for me anymore. I need to take a stand this way or that way and get involved in other ways. So lots of reasons that the engagement has shifted with the existing membership. We're about 400 members. We've stayed that way pretty much this past year, and we operate 7 units. So push came to shove over the years, the most recent years, and I'll share with you, I've been with the league since the summer of 2020, so just the last 4 years. And it was talking somebody into being on the board, cajoling, pulling. I mean, that's honestly how I initially got on the board. I was 6 months with the league and somebody was saying, we could really use blah, 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 you know, that kind of thing. And that, you know, is not sustainable because you have people who really are stepping up to do work, and all our boards are working boards. I mean, that is the nature of the beast. And so you need to be a committed person, and you need to volunteer and say with passion that, yeah, this is where I'm choosing to spend my time to further this organization and be involved in my community. So with all those things happening, people who said they'd be on the board pulled out before our board started this past year. 2 who were just appointed pulled out, and then within a month we lost another one for personal reasons. Things happen, but what we did not have was a president. And so the president from last year said, I'll stay on for 2 more months till the end of the summer until you find somebody. And nobody was found. And so the board that was left decided that, you know, we can just figure out a way forward. So we really operated this past year, I'll call it a transition year. And the first vice president and the second vice president, and then a director at large, the 3 of us got together and said, okay, we'll sort this out and we'll assume all the responsibilities of a president. And that's how we operated this past year. And honestly, there are a lot of positives to shared leadership because everybody has different skill sets that they bring to the table. And the 3 of us for sure had different, we all complemented each other, and we could pick up when somebody was away or had some other thing going on, even though we each had our own major sort of area of responsibility and constantly sort of would talk with each other just to share, so everybody was up to speed that was going on. we rotated the board meetings and the running of the board meetings, so it was just much easier across. And we sat down with the board that was left in August, September, and we said, okay, you know, let's take a look at what we want to prioritize for the coming year. And that's the other thing that I really strongly feel for organizations to be healthy is just prioritize and pick the things that you feel that you can do successfully and with quality, rather than saying, oh my gosh, I got to get it all. This is what they did last year or 3 years ago, or, you know, to be successful at one or two things rather than sort of not getting anything done. I would always really vote for those few successful things, because that's what you build your reputation and your commitment and your welcoming in the community from those few successes. So this past year, that's really how we operated. And internally, we worked to make several changes. One, to update our bylaws. So we are now moving to a more shared leadership. Officially, this coming year, we have our annual meeting coming up. We're looking to have a co-presidency going forward. And not to say that that's the only way, but that there's options now for more shared leadership going forward. And additionally, we decided to focus about looking at ourselves to say, how can we operate with more agility, to be more welcoming, so we didn't need to have two boards, and, you know, really realize that the two organizations did not work necessarily with where we were financially, and then also just in terms of volunteer management. And we're moving, hopefully, with, again, the upcoming annual meeting to merge the two organizations and just have one going forward. So it's been, I just call it really a transition year for Seattle King County. And I look for it more being this shared leadership going forward. I just see a lot more pluses with this complementary skill set. And it takes a lot of pressure, it eases the pressure, and it's more conversational. There's more community, frankly, rather than sort of having this very specific structure. So for us, even though we were short on board members this past year and we had no president at all, I think we really moved forward, and the people that were on the board were a community. We talked together, we all got along, and our board meetings were efficient, and we felt really good about it. So
Thank you, Barb. There's a couple handouts at the end of the front table with the contact information for our panelists in case you want more information about their particular model. I have a couple questions for you, Barb. Are you moving towards the 501c3 or 501c4? And could many of us are not familiar with units because our leads don't have them. Can you explain a little bit how that works?
two things. So 501c3 is the organization where is really the more voter services, where you can donate and do a tax write-off against it. The other one,
C4.
C4, thank you, is the advocacy model. And we traditionally had those two. We're going to move to the C3. And the reason is that even with the C3, you can do 20% of your budgeted money towards advocacy. And frankly, we do advocacy, you know, without spending dollars. So we don't ever really envision us in any of the near future spending more than 20% of a budget. So we feel very, very comfortable going forward that we can pursue our voter services path and our advocacy path all within the C3. Since Seattle King County is really spread out geographically, and we have about 400 membership, we have units which are smaller groups that have traditionally been organized by geographic area. So they would meet in person, they'd have an agenda. Sometimes they have a guest speaker. Oftentimes they're following up on, subjects and information and issues that have been talked across all of King County. Sometimes they're focused on a particular activity that's just happening within their geographic area. They may do voter outreach, they may organize their own little events, they may be in charge of organizing and either hosting or co-hosting a city council forum for their particular geographic area. Since COVID, we've also formed an online unit that meets at night. We're trying to, to grow membership and to make us more open, look at units meeting at different times of the day and the night, and a virtual unit seems to be a good option for some people. So we have had over our history units come and go in different geographic areas because to a certain degree, they also have the same challenge opportunity with leadership because every unit needs to sort of have a leader or a couple of people who will co-lead and put together the agenda and run the meetings.
Thank you, thank you. We'll take questions at the end because we'll have plenty of time. Wende Sanderson is from Skagit, and you have an interesting model of leadership, and she's also going to share a few ideas on conflict management.
Thanks, Nancy. At the Skagit League, we sort of are maybe we've been in survival mode for a really long time. We were a unit at large up until I think towards the end of 2019. And at that time, we had enough oomph to be able to actually become an official league. But all along, we have felt like we've bootstrapped a little bit, and whatever needed to be done, we'd find somebody who'd be willing to do it. So 2 years ago, when we were trying to find people to run for office, we had someone for treasurer and someone for secretary, but no one who would sign up to run for president or vice president. And we kind of struggled with that, and we tried to cajole and do all those things, and we were not fortunate enough to be able to accomplish that. And so at our annual meeting, what we decided was we were really committed to doing candidates forums. We thought it was really important to the community and that the work that the league does, we just couldn't let it die. And so we decided we're going to figure it out. So we just went ahead and we had our committees. The voter services committee was very strong and active, which was great. We had a gentleman who was interested in housing for all, and he wanted to move forward with that plan of work. And so it just became something that when we needed someone to do something, we'd sort of raise the call and someone would step up and do it. So when Nancy asked me, well, how would you describe your leadership model? That did not resonate with me at all because it was really not a model per se, but it was a group of, like a subset of committed people who would do whatever it took in order to be able to accomplish the necessary things as part of the league to make it happen. So for example, when somebody wants to email our league president or leadership, we have an email address that's a distribution list that goes to 3 different people. And so when we get an email, it's like, okay, which one of us is most suited to respond to this particular thing? And that has worked out really well because those 3 people are able to get in touch with each other and figure out a path forward. The other thing that our board decided, we only meet quarterly. The board only meets quarterly. And we decided that we would have the quarterly on the calendar when the quarterly meetings were going to be. So we set those up ahead of time and we decided who was going to host each one of the quarterly meetings. So there wasn't question or scrambling. We're good at scrambling, but not that good. So there wasn't scrambling at the tail end to say, board meeting's coming up. What do we need to do? We knew ahead of time and when it was going to be. And that has worked out well for us to have that advance. kind of planning. But as far as we were concerned, it was like, if it needs to get done, we'll find a way. And there are a lot of things, like Barbara said, there are a lot of things that we decided we really couldn't do because we just didn't have the energy, the leadership, or the willingness for people to step up. And if they're not willing to step up, that means it's not as important to the organization as, as other things. So we've been able to continue to do quite a bit with the local journalism committee this year, because for 2 years in a row, we've not had a president or a vice president. And we're continuing to hang on by our fingertips and try to make good stuff happen. How's that for a month? So Nancy, did you want to
Yes,
just?
yeah,
kind of
just a
segue?
little bit about conflict management and how we might address that when it comes up, because it will come up. We're
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, so one of the things that we had a leadership meeting that Mary had convened several months ago. And there was talk about this tension and things that were happening in these various leagues that were causing conflict within the league and how to handle it. And I have to say, I was sitting in and listening to the people who were dealing with some of these pretty serious issues about their league, and I was just amazed. So I want to start out by saying I am not an expert in conflict, and I feel sort of humble to be with a group of people who are figuring out great ways to try to build community and deal with each other in a civil and productive way. So my comments here are sort of like, duh, everybody knows this. But to me, it's sort of maybe a nice reminder about some things that could help us as we get into those conflict situations. The first thing is, exactly as Nancy said, I think recognizing that whenever you have people, you're going to have conflict, and conflict isn't always a bad thing. So understanding how our personal reaction is to conflict. There are people who are really at ease with having a lot of conflict going on around them, and they can just negotiate that. And there are people who really respond very uptight, yeah, to having conflict. And knowing where you are in that, especially if you're in a leadership position, knowing where you are in that so that you can recognize that ahead of time before conflict happens in your organization, I think is useful. And also to remember that we all have the opportunity to choose what our state of being is going to be when we go into a situation that there's, differences of opinion. And what a good friend of mine in the mediation world says is that we can choose a state of being that is relaxed, calm, and curious. And he has bracelets that are printed up with that on it. And it's sort of helpful to take a deep breath when you're confronted with a conflicting situation, to realize that you can be curious about what's going on and what the conflict is really about. Another thing that's helpful is if you have a policy about how you're going to manage conflict ahead of time. So before you even get there, if your organization decides if there are competing views, here's how we're going to handle it. Majority rules or consensus. Do we have to get to consensus? Or the person with the most longevity in the league gets to decide, whatever that is. But knowing how the ultimate resolution to a conflict is going to occur oftentimes can be really helpful. Another thing is, it's really helpful if we can help people understand that it's best not to fall in love with your solution. That if you can kind of recognize that you can put an idea out there and other people might even improve on your idea and not have to have it be your way or the highway. And the more we can encourage that kind of interaction, and I think at the league, at least in our league, that happens really well. So hopefully that happens really well in your league as well. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that, and I don't know that the league necessarily will agree with this or that you would, and I'd be interested in talking with people, but if you read Stephen Covey's, the 7 Habits of the Highly Effective People.
People, yeah.
So one of the habits is win-win or no deal. And so basically what he's proposing is that when you have a conflicting situation, you do all the things in order to try to resolve it. You try to understand where the other person is coming from. You know, get to the heart of it, because when conflict happens, it means that something that's important to someone is being threatened, right? I mean, that's ultimately what conflict is. So if you've gone through and you've tried to determine that and you still just can't come to something that's going to be satisfactory with all the parties, the option that Stephen Covey proposes is you don't do that. You walk away from that particular thing because the relationship is more important than, you know, winning or having that particular right position. So that's something that I think each league would have to decide, and would have to decide on based on what the issue at conflict is. But I think it's worth thinking about that, you know, ultimately we have a mission in the league. We're trying to accomplish really good things in our civic community. And we really want to have a congenial and, you know, great relationship with people in the community too. So deciding where the value is that we're going to place on that can also help with deciding how you want to, how strongly you want to insist on having your way in a particular conflicting situation.
Yeah.
So I hope that's helpful.
No, thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments, suggestions? Go ahead, Ellie.
I have a question. In each of your circumstances with shared leadership and while you were moving through this transition or now you're entering into it, how do you manage that lead one voice? Like who is speaking for the lead? I know, I think Bonnie, you said something about that you already have an agreement about who's going to speak and the words that they're going to use gets approved. But I'm just really curious how you manage that, because with what you were just talking about.
So what we do, for example, is the voter services chair is getting ready to write a letter to the editor or an opinion piece about voter services. And it seems that that makes sense because she's going to take some of that language. She's going to run it by us first, and then she will sign it as a representative of the league. Right now, some of our DEI people are going to be attending Pride events, and they have the opportunity to speak. And so they will run that by us, and it just seems like they're the person who would be the person who would speak on that. And so we do it on a case-by-case basis. And again, it's that idea that we need to know far enough ahead of time. We can pull an executive, you know, get it together to meet that, but we really, and again, that's an idea of this, you know, pretty detailed calendar. So the Pride events have been on the calendar since like March. So we're thinking ahead, are we going to do this? Are we going to have people representing? Are they going to speak or ask to speak? And then if so, what are they going to say?
So do you ever run into situations where maybe within this council or leadership, there are other members that have one-on-one or, you know, two, you know, kind of group conversations, but where someone does want to speak for the league, and think they've been given the ability to speak for the league and it doesn't run through the council? Do you ever have situations like that?
We had one that was kind of getting close to that. And what we found was that was before we had every chair of a committee, and that committee, just no fault of their own, kind of had taken a direction, and we were kind of aware of where that committee was going. And so what we had some people who were trained in conflict mediation who met with the people talking about, you know, what was happening, why it was so important, because we thought what they were doing was running against our nonpartisan policy in some ways. And so talked with them. And as a result of that one, the person decided that maybe they needed to find a group that was much more active, that aligned with their advocacy, that was more nonpartisan than we were. And we left on fairly good terms. That person is still a member of the league, but isn't the chair of the committee.
Okay. Thank you for that. And have you bumped into anything in Seattle King County while you're going through?
We, right now, the way we, approach speaking out really is also mostly by subject matter and who is most expert in the league at the time. And we have, just in the latter part of the year and the three of us would review whatever it was, so we're all in alignment anyway before whatever, whether it was a letter to the editor. There's one coming out now from Seattle King County. But the last 2 months, we finally got a comms director. And so now this comms person is, one that we, even though the three of us will still look at everything, we're including that person now, to build this consistency. When it comes to the work at the unit level, we have always had on the board what's called a unit liaison position. And that unit liaison position, brought stuff from the board out to the 7 units. And also shared information between the 7 units. So there was two-way communication and we believe consistency through that connection. So there wasn't just like units out there without any connection through the leadership and the board. So since I've been, like I said, just barely 4 years, I haven't run into a situation where someone just went out on their own and said good things or maybe possibly the wrong thing representing the league.
Good to know. And same for you.
Same for us too. We would go to our executive committee if something came up and we would have multiple people involved in deciding what to say, but we have a hard time finding people who will speak for the league. So that's not really a big issue for us.
And if I can just add
Yeah.
one quick thing. I worked with Judy Darrow, and I remember one of the things that she had put together was, it was kind of a multiple choice. You're in this situation and what would you say? And so we have used that a lot in our annual meeting, just to go through that, and lots of upfront about who speaks for the league, who doesn't, what can you say in a public meeting? If you're at a meeting and you have, if you're an observer core person, what you can or can't say, and just really have tried to do a lot of education with our own members so that they understand about who speaks for the league, what you say in a public. So Judy, that has been really, really helpful. Thank you.
Ooh,
Sounds good.
Yeah, that is,
in the orientation.
okay, yeah, because that would be something that the melt pods would really enjoy, that kind of information. Yeah, you had a question at the back?
It's been partially answered. We have units as well. And one of our issues, I don't know how I want to really phrase this, but annoyances maybe is that the unit leaders don't always want to report back to the board what they are doing. And so it's almost like we have 4 little lone wolf units, and
Yeah.
2 of them are pretty good about it, the other 2 don't. So you have a liaison.
Yeah.
But it's only one person that goes to all of the units. The unit leaders say, if you have the unit leaders, they don't report individually
To the
what
board.
you're doing.
Yeah, we have a unit liaison position that's on the board. And that position has a regular communication out to all the units. In addition to that, the board members themselves are encouraged to participate in a unit or to visit different units and to engage and have communications that way. But we don't, as a board, look for individual reports on a monthly basis from our 7 units or anything like that. Judy?
As a unit facilitator.
Yeah.
Charge of a unit. I became charge of a unit before we had a unit.
Liaison.
It was
Okay.
bizarre. And then we had a unit liaison, and it gave us somebody to give feedback to about what we're doing. And we got approval and praise and recognition for what we're doing. So the connection between the liaison is positive for the unit facilitator. we're gonna do this weekend, oh, great, good job, and, so it's really been helpful.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? Go ahead.
A question about kind of these so-called conflicts and like what's the nature of some of these conflicts? Are they about conduct of the league at large or stance on issues? As someone who's newer to the league, like what kinds of things have you seen that have had to be addressed? And that maybe weren't able to be addressed under a leadership model that just wasn't serving the right purpose.
I can answer some of that. Sometimes you run into situations where someone has been doing a particular job in the league and they may be very, very good at it, or they may be not so good, but they don't want to give it up. They don't want to share. And it's very important to think about succession in the league because we're not always going to be there. And if you've got someone who holds so tightly to their position and won't share how it's done or any of their contacts, that can be a real issue. Another thing is if situations with nonpartisan come up, and particularly a good example is this year where the state league has positions on the initiatives. And yet there's a way that we are to handle that or not handle that in voter service tabling and then in advocacy work. So that can definitely be a conflict because league members have very strong opinions, which is good. And there may be a lot of pushback on one way or the other. And so that needs to be handled. Someone could, go ahead, Judy.
I was just gonna share that I think it's very important that whenever a group of people come together, whether it's a unit meeting or a board meeting or some committee meeting, whatever, is to get grounded in the purpose of the meeting, the goals, the outcome, the shared mission, whatever it is. And that's the grounding for whatever the conversation, the topic, the takeaway, the to-dos are from that meeting. And you can start from the get-go to separate what normally is conflict or personality conflicts. And if you keep yourself grounded at the work at hand, a lot of that solves itself really, because you just keep bringing the parties back to what's on the agenda for today. What do we need to get accomplished and why, what's our shared goal mission for that? And then you also can put in very specific things like 2 minutes per comment, or, you can really manage things that way. But I think if you start each connection being grounded in why we're here as a collective, you can avoid a lot of that from the get-go.
I think another example would be, we started being election observers. That was a fairly recent thing we did. And at the initial training, so we were there with the two major political parties, observers, and then also us. And at the meeting, there was some pushback about why we were even there. That happened right in the training. And that the league is not nonpartisan. We were a bunch of this and that and everything, and that went on. And at that time I was had been the spokesman. I was the person who arranged the observer. And I had a couple of league members who are like elbowing me and like, aren't you gonna respond to this? Do you hear what they're saying? And you know what? That was not, in my mind, the time and place. So there were some people who were pretty upset about it, but we talked about it later and what the reasoning was. And then I think they were okay with it. But I think that can be an example of a situation that comes up where somebody thinks, I would have handled it this way, and why didn't you say anything, and those kinds of things. And sometimes just giving it a little bit of time, and then like Wendy saying, more relaxed, and here's why I did this, and I did find out about this person who spoke and have a little more information about that person. And then at another time have just tried to not be reactive. And so now our relationship with the county auditor and the election staff is that, oh yeah, those League of Women Voters, they're a class act. You chose not to jump in and derail our training, and they really appreciate it.
Something that has been due to us are some unfortunate comments that are made at meetings. Not everybody hears them. And so we will be addressing that at the July meeting, you know, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. It's an educational type thing, and it's, we're going to handle it on a broad, in a broad way rather than target or, you know, individualize it. So just make it a broad talk, topic. Okay. If there's nothing else, thank you so much. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I actually have a question. I'm curious if anybody else had it, since I heard about your board meeting quarterly. And, you know, we meet monthly, and sometimes we feel, you know, we're in touch within the month, sometimes daily, a couple times. And I'm just curious that you sounded like you felt very comfortable meeting quarterly and not having to meet monthly, and I'm just, is anybody else surprised about that? That quarterly is working? Yeah.
I mean, I've been on the board for a while, and just things come up, and it's too easy to, you know, I'm glad you have who is it that has the calendar? Is it Bonnie?
Yeah.
Yeah, but and you may have one too, but I just was thinking, in order to speak with one voice, in order to stay nonpartisan, in order to stay focused and not have conflicts, it's like you need to get, this is just my thought, you need to regroup often enough and have, you know, keep to the purpose of the meeting, you know, the different agenda items. Because yeah, things come up too quickly that need to get addressed, and if you sit fast too long, there's all these side conversations that can potentially happen. That's just my wondering.
Have you been meeting quarterly for a couple of years now, or just? Oh, wow.
Yeah, but I think maybe one of the things that might be different is that there is a group that, like our journalism committee is meeting probably every 2 months. And that group overlaps a lot with people that are on the board. And so we talk about a lot of things that perhaps other boards are talking about. But we're and again, because we're in this kind of free flowing Skagit kind of thing, we maybe are dealing with those things that are coming up that your boards deal with. And we may be dealing with them within a committee, right, that has enough board members that if anybody raised an issue, you know.
How many members are in your?
There's 74 Skagit members, and there's about 14 of us that actually, you know, are doing work at it, that are raising, you know.
Okay, Judy, last comment.
That's what I was gonna mention, that Skagit has about 74 and Seattle King County has 375. So it's, I can see why our board meets monthly, because a lot can happen in 3 weeks when there's 375 members.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay, does everybody remember their number? And Deanne, you are 14.
She came in after we.
Yeah, she's number 14
Okay.
and you're number 15. So, okay. All right, Allison is our tech person. She's going to draw for us. I can get this open. No. I'm Ziploc challenged.
Oh, right.
Let's see if it's,
Okay, just one.
oh, we don't have that number here.
Then it's for me. Whatever that number is, that's my number. And we don't.
No, we don't have that one.
Either. There are too many, they're too high, yes. Let's just see. Did we get a smaller one this time?
Yes, number 9. Okay. We've got a coffee card for you. Thank you, everyone.
I have to tell you guys, when I was 4 years old, they called me up at, my grade school Christmas party, and my dad brought me up on his shoulders and he said, "You better draw our chicken." Guess who's chicken? My dad, he got free radio.
Nice.
Luck holds strong.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.